Project leader requesting detainee review.
Countersign.
Alpha Moon 3.
Name?
Classified. Interdepartmental task force, but Deputy Director Kendrick sends his regards.
We got visitors.
Whoa, whoa, is that a polygraph?
We'll start with an easy one. What's your name?
Mike Ross.
Where do you work?
Pearson Hardman.
Where'd you attend law school? What? What's the matter?
Nothing.
You're lying.
No, I'm not.
I beg to differ.
I'm proud to say that I have a diploma from Harvard Law. Now it's time that you accept the situation. I'm not afraid of you.
I started out thinking that I could use my strength to empower someone to achieve something that to them seemed fantastic. Who better to extend my hand to than an out-of-shape, middle-aged blind man? I had no idea that my friend would ultimately save me from defeat and show a strength even greater than my own.
Well, our next guest is actor, bodybuilder, likes to stay fit, you name it. Sebastian McLean. You're over in Toronto, right?
Yeah, that's
when you're not traveling, of course.
No, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sebastian, thanks for being here. Great to have you. I am such an admirer of your, I just have always been really fond of that whole bodybuilding culture. And it was not until later in life that I really decided that, well, I was a musician my whole young life. And, there was a whole big party scene. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. And the 80s was a hard time if you were a young man. Let me tell you what, it was a big party nationally, I tell you, and it never seemed to end. And then I got a little older and I started really admiring people who knew about the human body. And it really shocked me how little I knew about the human body. And I started myself on this education that has never ended, and I don't think it'll ever end, because the opinions on these things keep changing and changing. And I just want to thank you for being here. And I think you're going to be a really, really special, a source of knowledge that our viewers are really going to really like. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I'll do my best. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Explain what you are currently doing, currently working when you're traveling and helping, professionals out, entertainment professionals.
Yeah, well, currently what I'm doing, there, of course, with all the COVID stuff happening, everything, the industry was sort of turned upside down, and there's still aftershocks from that.
Yeah.
The way that people are auditioning, and even the way that a lot of the studios are kind of circulating some of their actors has kind of, I would say, narrowed a little bit because of testing protocols that they were doing and things like that. So in the midst of all that, I've been reviving some of my past bodybuilding material, because over the years, as I was kind of coming up through the film and TV industry, I would kind of I was always keeping my hand in the world of bodybuilding, where, even after I retired from competition, I'd still be training for roles, and I'd still be kind of disseminating where I could that information out to the public or interested people who I could help. And I've been kind of consolidating that. So I just actually just released my book, Naturally Massive, on Amazon. I think that's going through processing right now. It should be ready to check out in a day or two. I was selling it as a digital book years ago, and I kind of let it die on a private website years back, but I'm reviving that. And then I started working on just a technique that I use when I'm getting ready for roles. If I haven't been training for a while, I've been drinking too much beer and having too much pizza, or doing some summer stuff, as it were. When I find out a role may be upcoming, what I'll do is I do a kind of water flush for about 10 days, and I've lost as much as 16 pounds in 10 days doing that. So I packaged that into a free program for people. And I started just seeing what it would do for other people who wanted to give it a shot. So for 10 days, they amp up their water intake and follow a few steps that I give them over that 10-day window. And I had a guy lose 36 pounds in 10 days doing this. Sounds crazy, but the reason it happened was because he'd done chemo about 3 years earlier, and he was fully recovered, but he never got into detoxing after the chemo. He just kind of went on with his life, drinking beer, and put on a few pounds. And when he did this 10-day detox that I do to get ready for roles, literally lost 36 pounds in 10 days. Couldn't believe it. So most people don't get that kind of an effect, but you know, I've had people lose 20 pounds. I mean, I've lost 16 doing it. So yeah, so I put that up there for free on camerareadybody.com. And if I ever do kind of a paid for program every now and then, if I have a time window where I think I can, I might do like a 12-week program. I let people know who've maybe done that program if they want to jump on board with me in limited numbers. But so yeah, that's sort of what I've done to maintain the bodybuilding side of things while I've been writing scripts and pushing things with producers to try and get that ball moving again. And I've still been engaged with the audition process this past summer. Landed a couple roles that wound up in some shaky ground because of COVID testing and things like that. But anyway, that's maybe a part of another story.
Wow. Well, I am personally really excited to find out that you do occasionally have some pizza and beer. My guilt level has dropped significantly. Exactly. And I feel like I can breathe a little easier right now because, you know, I've accidentally done that a couple of times. Actually,
you gotta live a little.
But the power of water. You know, I'm really starting to learn that, you know, people just making my kid drink water is a nightmare, you know?
Yeah.
Well, what is it with water? What is it with that water flush? How does that work?
Well, you know, what happens is that our body's really smart about protecting us. So when you don't drink a lot of water, as a lot of people do, I mean, you know, when there have been years where, you know, all I really want to have is maybe a beer and a little bit of juice to kind of rehydrate, and you don't think about drinking copious amounts of water. So when your body's sort of underhydrated, what it does is it begins to store fluid around the organs and in the skin, and you know, that puffy look you get in the morning, that's all part of water retention that happens, but it happens through the whole body, your organ systems, your in your skin tissues and everything. So, and that can become chronic because of course over the years people, you know, might have a glass or two or maybe half a glass, and then the rest is coffee and juice, right? So in order to get rid of that retention, when you start drinking 3.5, 4 liters of water a day, what happens is suddenly your body just realizes, hey, I don't have to hang on to this old water anymore. There's plenty coming in and I don't have to store it. So it starts to cycle the fluid through. And a lot of what looks like maybe puffy tissue or fat, you know, even in the jowls and things like that can just be a lot of fluid buildup. So when people drink a lot of water, it just flushes right out of their organs. And as long as you don't have to drink that much perpetually, but as long as you're drinking a couple liters a day, you know, you're getting your 8 to 12 glasses in a day, your body won't retain it anymore. Of course, if you go back to not drinking again, your body's going to try and protect you again. So that's the kind of dynamic you're working with there.
Wow. So we have a gang viewers, we have a great source of information right here. So let me tell you, no wonder I hear you travel quite a bit, and you have some pretty, you know, big clients and stuff that use this information. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah, I guess a lot of that ties into when I'm working on set. Sometimes I'll like I was working on American Gods, and I don't want to single anybody out just depending on how they want to kind of have their training programs approached. But some of the characters that I was, you know, had a chance to kind of work with backstage, offset, things like that. We got talking about upcoming scenes that they would have where they might need to be wearing a tank top or something a little less than, you know, full body coverage. So they want to make sure they're looking reasonably tight. And yeah, so those conversations wind up with, yeah, whether it was American Gods or when I was working on X-Men, it becomes part of the natural dialogue, because actors are always trying to make sure that they're prepped for their scene. And, you know, if they're, even if they're in decent shape, the days where they're going to be wearing a little bit less, they want to make sure they're peaking on that day nicely, so that everything kind of, the angles come out the way they want them to. So it's an opportunity to kind of share that. It's actually part of what gave me the idea for putting it out, this idea out as camera ready body, was because that was what I was kind of talking about, you know, when I was hitting some of these shows and talking to actors about what they do to get in shape. They want to be camera ready, right? So, and they don't always have a lot of time. They might have a few days. They gotta, even if they've only got maybe 2 or 3 days, drinking a lot of water and cutting their sodium, that helps accelerate the kind of flushing process as well, if you cut back on your salts and your sugars. So that combination makes it even more powerful. So that's another one of the things that I cover in the program as well. But yeah, it comes up in various forms though. Like, some people are less interested in those instantaneous results. Of course, I've worked with some people in you know, kind of more action oriented type roles. They want to know, you know, what are some of the techniques for building muscle really rapidly. So I've kind of talked about what I did back in my competition days, because through the majority of all of my competitions, I was natural and competing against guys that sometimes weren't, because they weren't tested shows. So to compensate for that, I worked out a way to accelerate muscle growth by boosting your natural hormone production, by kind of oscillating or moving your diet back and forth every 2 weeks. So your insulin levels would kind of amp up for 1 week, and then you kind of ramp them back down, and then amp them back up again. So all of that is something that kind of gets into more of the muscle building side of it. It's what I would do to accelerate natural muscle growth. So
that sounds very technical. You definitely know. I mean, you have actually free information too, where people can get started. I mean, this is information that, like, the top Hollywood star, I'm sure the information is the same that you're giving, like, that goes to the most top Hollywood stars, right? I mean, the body is the body, and that's how it works.
That's right. I mean, there are a lot of different celebrity trainers out there that have their own unique spin, but there are some things that are, you know, they're not complicated to do, but they require steady application, let's say. So for example, a lot of people know that drinking a lot of water is important, or you know, having an ample amount, but it might not occur to them that if they kind of super compensate or have, say, 3 or 4 liters of it a day for a short run of time, it has a specific kind of flushing effect that makes you look a lot leaner in a very tight window. So those are the kinds of tricks and techniques that celebrities pick up on when they've got trainers who know how that works. They'll kind of reveal that to them. They'll apply that, and bam, they've got a little bit of a secret that they're applying to get ready for a show. But my thinking was that, you know, everybody, because some of these things are so easy to kind of glom onto, they don't require even exercise. I'm not saying you shouldn't exercise, but I'm saying that this process actually works without exercise. And then it's a good starting point though, because once people see that result, they get motivated and they want to do more. But yeah, these are things that everybody should have an opportunity to grab. So why keep it to just people in Hollywood?
Good point.
Well, I saw your bodybuilding pictures that are just like incredible. I cannot believe how a human being can achieve that. I mean, seriously, is your life was it life different for you then compared to now? A lot different, a little?
It was, I guess the emphasis is different, because depending on the role now, I mean, I could, if I had to get in shape for something, like a gladiator role or something like that, then of course my life would kind of flash into that paradigm all over again. You'd be training, you know, 6 days a week and dieting, you know, all 6 of those, or even 7 days a week, you know, doing everything you need to lean down and fit the part. Kind of like, you know, The Rock did just recently for Black Adam. That got in probably the best shape he ever has, but his training was crazy for that show, and it produced amazing results. But that aside, I mean, nowadays, I kind of move back and forth from being at the writing desk a lot and kind of networking with producers. So there's a lot of sort of creative in my head stuff where you're trying to kind of work with script editors and kind of get stories worked out that way and develop pitch material. And then I try and get to the gym maybe 3 days a week just to keep things maintained, so that's very different, of course, from the days when I was competing, and I did that straight through for about a decade. And while I was competing, of course, yeah, you kind of build your life around, the dieting, the training. I was still kind of doing work in the film industry a little bit. Back then, it was more kind of the beginnings. So it was the short films and things that I could get into. It was a lot of fun.
Sure.
It's just a very physical sort of time frame in your life where everything you're doing is kind of oriented around that. Now, in order to drive some of my own stories forward, I've had to kind of divide my time between the cerebral part of it and sort of thinking through stories, digging into those concepts, and still, staying in close enough shape that I can pull it together in a bigger way if I really have to. So.
Well, great success stories. I mean, you did the whole bodybuilding thing very successfully, acting very successfully. And now you've got your programs and you're helping other people. Just awesome. I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No. What about okay, so you're still into the acting, right? What was it like to work on some of these hit shows? I saw you in X-Men, of course, Dark Phoenix.
You got to be in some good shape to be in an X-Men movie.
How does one even
get
casted to work on an X-Men film, by the way?
Oh, well, listen, it was unexpected. But I mean, of course, I guess there's, to some degree, the general answer to that might be that, there's a build-up process, because I've been working in a lot of different TV shows here in Toronto prior to that. So I guess in that sense, casting offices will give you opportunities that are maybe a little different after you've been in a few shows and kind of proven yourself a little bit. But yeah, I got handed the audition. It was actually a self-tape. I remember doing that one from home, and I wasn't feeling that great that day because I had an issue with sulfites, and it's kind of balancing out now, but I think it came from eating way too much hot sauce all the time, and it's loaded with sulfites. So I was kind of oversaturated after a year of that, because I'd use it as my flavoring on a lot of diet food. And it would give me a hangover every time I'd have sulfites. It felt just like a hangover. The head would be pounding. And anyway, so on this one occasion, I'd had an overload of hot sauce the night before, was really not feeling in the best shape. And they had me playing in the audition. I was sort of a command module operator in a space shuttle. And I was just supposed to be doing, quality checks for the equipment, and as we're tacking down the runway, or as we're flying. But the lines were just not sticking in my head because of the hangover effect that I was feeling from all these sulfates. And so I had little sticky notes stuck around the camera as reference points for how I was checking, wind speed and flaps and all these little things going on here. So I was trying to kind of just deal with the fact that I was reading my lines and looking kind of serious but hungover. And I guess it kind of, maybe it came off as me just looking a bit more intense, because I handed in a tape and I was like, that's not going anywhere. And then a couple weeks went by. I totally forgot about it, and then my agent called and said, "Oh, they want you for X-Men. They really liked your audition." Nice. So yeah, that's how I got the part. But of course, then I flew into Montreal, and it was just a spectacular setup in terms of the effects and the LED lighting setups and green screens and everything that they use now. It's quite an amazing experience.
What was the set really like? Tell us in detail about the set.
Yeah, well, they had there were two set pieces that were done. One was a space shuttle set piece, and the other one was the X-Men fighter jet that kind of flies up in the scene. And it's just the interiors, though, because all the exterior stuff is done with CG. But that interior sits in the middle of what I thought it was just going to be one big green screen room. But actually now what they do is they set up these massive LED panels so that when you're looking at the window, let's say, of one of these things, and there's supposed to be like an explosion from the sun or something going off in the end film, what happens is the LED panel all lights up and kind of follows, your eye line can follow where maybe a fireball is going. So if you're standing on set and they say action and you're supposed to react like there's a fireball, in the past you just have to pretend and react, and they put in all that stuff afterwards, including the lighting effect, even, you know. But now what happens is the lighting is happening in real time. So although you're not seeing a fireball, you're tracking with these huge LED panels, and so, and then that's tied in, of course, to the green screen stuff where they have all that going on around you. So yeah, we did you know, body scans of all of us so that they could create digital doubles of us, so they could have us floating around in space. And there's quite a process to it. I mean, I was involved in a fairly small but significant scene where there's a rescue mission going on, and one of the astronauts in the shuttle.
Oh yeah.
It happens fairly quick on screen, but we were there for over 2 weeks getting all that stuff put together, you know. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
What does that compare to your TV shows? How long, when you're guest appearing in an episode of, let's say, Heroes Reborn, or Lucky 7 was another one that I remember you from, because it was a short-lived TV show, but I really liked it, you know.
Oh, great. Yeah, you know, I haven't even seen Lucky 7 yet, but
I think it's on Hulu. It was.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it's a big change because at that budget scale, I guess, is what you're doing it, because that was, I think the budget for that was something like $200 million or something like that. So when you're dealing with budgets like that, yeah, you see a lot of what goes into the process at many levels. And when you're working on and that's why you have to stay for so long for some of these shots, because there's, you know, the CG crew has to come in and take images of everything from 360 degrees so they can replicate you and rooms, and then you've got to go to, you know, scan pods where they scan your body, and you know, and take pictures of you from every angle as well, so they can duplicate you, and then you go back and do the scene again, and you have to do it, you know, you have to do it a couple different ways, of course, multiple different angles, and then there's so all of that's going on, you know, and being accomplished, because to some extent a lot of the money is there to kind of get the coverage and do all these things. When you're doing television, of course, they have to scale that down, and so you know, I've been on for maybe a week, but you're probably doing a couple episodes sometimes when you're doing that week. You know, the first 3 days you're at the tail end of one episode, you're getting introduced, and then you're showing up in the next episode, and they shoot you and you're out.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, and I mean, they're both fantastic experiences. There's this kind of realism that comes from being on those kinds of TV shows where you're working on location, so you don't have to imagine things in the same way sometimes as you do on a big budget special effects heavy thing, because you in those situations you have to react to things that aren't there, and they put them in afterwards.
A lot of green on those days, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, you've done so much. So can I ask you a little bit about your past? Like, so you were born in Canada then, right?
Yeah, I was born actually here in Toronto, and my family moved out to New Brunswick, Canada,
Wow.
when I was 5. So I spent most of my years out there from 5 until about my early to mid 30s, and then I got back to Toronto. And while I was out there were still films coming, because they would come through to Halifax, places like that, and in New Brunswick as well. So I started doing some of my lead role work out in New Brunswick. It was sort of where I got my first couple opportunities that way, along with the film community out there. They have a great small film community in Fredericton, New Brunswick, where I kind of grew up. And yeah, as soon as high school was done, I was off like a shot, kind of doing that stuff. And yeah, that was a product of largely my dad's decision to move to New Brunswick, I think, because he wanted to get out of the rat race in Toronto, didn't want to be working a desk, and he was kind of a man of the woods,
Yeah, you described him as a skilled woodsman, I think. Please elaborate. No, that's so cool. I come from a long line of rancher cowboy guys, right? So that's a big deal to me, and I love the woods of northern Arizona. I when I think of Canada, all I really have as a reference point is very tall pine trees of Arizona. So I love the woods. And so tell me about your dad, please.
Yeah, well, he was kind of, I mean, when I was growing up, Dad was always watching cowboy movies, westerns, or the Great Frontier and all of that stuff. And even when I was growing up in Mississauga and back before we moved, we'd always go up to Muskoka because my grandfather had a spot up there. My dad was into water skiing and hiking through the woods, and I'd always around the cottage, he'd be cutting down trees. And so he was just pining to get out of the kind of Toronto environment in terms of what he was doing at the time. So he got an opportunity to help with a building project out in New Brunswick where they had to clear cut a huge amount of forest and help on the building project too. But when I got out there at 5 years old, he would take me out into the woods with like a 4-foot pole, and there were all these other loggers and everything out there. My dad would I was the only 5-year-old out there, but my dad would have me trekking through the woods with him behind him in the 4 feet of snow. So he'd be pounding the snow down for me so I could get to a tree that he would cut down, and then I'd measure the tree with my pole. Dad would cut it, and I'd do that for a few hours until I got freezing cold, and then we go to a campfire and eat sandwiches and watch the big porters come in and kind of lift the logs with their big claws. And so yeah, that was I saw my dad as this and this is who he was. He was very physical that way, loved that stuff. But yeah, he also came from a background of singers and performers a little bit as well. He did some stage theater and stuff like that. And so that's part of how he met my mom, who was a professional ballet dancer in Europe. And when she came over to Canada, they happened to meet at the same place. And yeah, they seemed like an odd coupling at the time, but it worked out pretty well. And my mother was a great influence on me as well, even though that she was long past her ballet days. I had a real appreciation because of her for classical music and movement and things like that. So kind of pairing my dad's physicality, because he looked kind of like a bodybuilder himself. He was a gymnast when he was growing up and a wrestler, so he had that kind of physique. And of course that had me as a young guy wanting to be like my dad, and watching him doing all these physical things that had to do with bringing value to his family by providing and kind of knocking down trees and things like that. So that was sort of offset by a more I would say a more refined approach that my mother would take to movement and dance and things like that. So when I got into bodybuilding, I kind of put that together. And I did pretty well with the posing stuff. That was part of what helped my success in the sport, because I knew how to move on stage, which came from my mom. And of course, my dad was a big supporter of me getting into the weights, because we get it in the woodshed when I was a kid and do a lot of that. So they were very key to my forward steps from the very beginning.
And there it is again, great parents driving the whole thing. We see it again and again and again. And gosh, it's just heartwarming to hear that. Your mom did ballet. I mean, that's hard.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we had someone on here and she was saying, don't do it. It's so hard. Yeah. I mean, she literally, that was her advice, because she went through all of that. It's very, very brutal. And your mom even worked with like Julie Andrews, right?
She did. Yeah. She worked with Julie Andrews. There are a number of, I think she worked with George Lucas's brother on some experimental film projects.
Wow.
It was so hard to pry out of her sometimes what she was involved in, because she was very humble that way. She didn't really make a big thing out of it. When she was happy when it was done, because like you say, it's a very hard and grueling business. You're not just, it's harder than bodybuilding, because bodybuilding, you go in the gym for an hour and a half and maybe and the workout's over, and then you focus on the eating part. But with ballet, Mom would say, look, she would put in sometimes 6 to 8 hours a day just practicing and kind of their bodies are like coiled springs. I mean, when you watch them moving on stage and how they're built, they're super lean, and just the amount of power in those legs to do those leaps and everything. It's a different kind of strength, but you know, that grace and control comes from some very intense training. And the artistic business has a lot of drama mixed into it behind the scenes. So I think when my mom kind of reached the retirement point on that, she was happy she experienced it, but happy to be, you know, moving into another phase of her life as well.
Sure.
I keep thinking of the word discipline. Your father seemed to have a lot. Anyone in the ballet, you better have that.
Oh,
You're never going to go anywhere. So it seems like you're training on just the disciplinary level, which just like off the scale. And you just have to be pretty tough to achieve the things that you've done. So I'm very impressed with your parents and you all.
Well, thank you. Thanks. These are all experiences that build on one another. You know, I mean, my dad had a different set of ambitions, and my mom as well. But you know, I definitely learned from the willingness to kind of put yourself into tough situations, I guess. It was one of the, because, you know, my dad introducing me to the kind of grueling experience sometimes of being in the woods, which was also exciting. But, you know, you get the excitement because you're willing to put yourself into the challenge. And with my mom, you know, recognizing how far someone can go, as understated as she was about it, but that came again from a level of commitment and things like that. So although my path was maybe a slightly different one, I know that it was probably part of what made me believe that it was possible. And I say that because where I grew up, you know, you have common ambitions a lot of times. I grew up in New Brunswick. I grew up in the country. A lot of people were aspiring to be farmers or truckers or you know, woodsmen themselves, and those are very honorable jobs to do. It's just that when you're in that environment, if you haven't been exposed to maybe other options, it might seem a bit crazy that you want to get on a bodybuilding stage on the national level and wind up being in movies. So a lot of kids, as much as they find that exciting, it's just not part of their orbit. But because my parents kind of did these sort of big jumps and put themselves in these uncomfortable positions, it gave me that match that I needed, that starting point to go, okay, if I start with this 10-pound weight, you know, and a couple little weights, I can build something out of this physically. And then if I, you know, proceed to kind of apply the same kind of discipline to understanding art and literature and the craft, you know, I may not be great, but I can build on the little bit of skill until I build it into something bigger, just like you do with, you know, with a body that's skinny, and you gradually build it into something bigger, right? So
smart.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Your parents are so cool. What was unexpected to me is how your dad liked theater and acting and stuff like that. Yeah. I didn't really expect that to come out of your mouth. I thought maybe your mom got you into acting and stuff like that, but that was really, I like the diversity, and your father was probably an incredible guy.
Yeah, Dad's been a real inspiration to a lot of people. Actually, he did his first bodybuilding competition, I think, a year or two after I retired. Wow. When he was just about to turn 60, and because he watched me, I made a documentary in my last competition with a guy who was losing his eyesight and in his 50s, early 50s at the time, and he lost 80 pounds and wound up getting on stage with me, and we made a documentary about that called Facing Goliath, which is on YouTube. And that was one of the first films that I produced. But after Dad saw that, I think he was like, hey, you know, all these years you've been doing it, why didn't you do that with me?
Oh, cool.
I was like, oh,
nice.
Well, Dad, you were right there with me training, so I didn't even think of it. But yeah, so when he was just about to turn 50, he got in better shape than he was in when he was in his 20s, and he did his first competition. So I was his coach backstage, kind of cheering Dad on, and he did a great job. Now he's 78 and still training, thinking about competing when he's 80 in 2 years, and there's all kinds of
Jeez.
Wow. I mean, oh man, I'm totally gonna take advantage of all the information you have, Sebastian, because I'm just totally inspired. Because, you know, I'm in my mid-50s, and I'm like, you know what, I can go this way or that way, and I'm gonna go the way your dad went.
Yeah,
There we go.
And man, that is
you
just so
can.
awesome.
You can, totally. That was what kind of dad continues to kind of spread out now, and not by trying even. He goes to the gym, but people come up, talk to him who are, whether they're 20 or whether they're in their 70s or somewhere in between. They're like, man, if you can do it, then I don't have any excuse not to. And I gotta, say it's been helpful to me too, because in this business that I'm in, sometimes what happens is that you get caught up in the writing process. I get kind of obsessive, and my girlfriend Susanna was even noting how I just kind of disappear into my computer sometimes when I'm writing, and I won't go to the gym. I barely eat, and then when I come out and I've got something kind of complete, a first draft, I'll go, okay, I'll eat food now and I'll start going to the gym again. But sometimes you go through long windows like that, and I think, man, I'm losing ground, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back to where I was, 10 or 15 years ago. It's getting a bit tougher. I have that thought for a second. I look at dad and go, wait a minute, I got no excuses. I just, it's if he can do it now, I can do it now, certainly. So that's been very helpful to me.
When did you first start competing, and what kind of magazines were you on? Were you on like covers of magazines also, or?
I don't recall being on any covers per se. I started when I was 15 competing. I did my first show at 15, so it was a kind of a gradual buildup. I think I did get some feature articles, and I actually I was published with all of my sort of workout notes and everything in Muscle Mag International and American Health and Fitness at the time. A few of their not I want to say episodes, but a few of their magazines anyway put those into circulation. But when I was 15, I was the youngest guy they had competing in the province, I think at the time ever, in terms of seriously competing. I think they had a couple of 5-year-olds that came out with their dads. But yeah, I was the youngest guy, and I came in third in my first competition. And I think I beat one guy because there were 4 of us in that lineup. They were all older than me, though. I think the youngest guy was the guy that was 17, 18, 19, and then there was me at 15. And it was a really close contest. There were judges coming up to me backstage in that first show saying, there's like 1 point between you and the guy in second place. We think you might beat him. Some guys have you in second. Some guys maybe have put you in first. And there was the guy in first place was 1 point away from the guy in second. So it was a super tight show. They had us out there for half an hour, totally exhausted. And when I got my third place, and I got a trophy, I was ecstatic because I beat somebody, and I knew it was a tight race. But that battle really fueled my appetite. And so I came back the next year at 16, and I got second place. And then by the time I came back a third year, I was winning the overall competitions. So I'm glad actually that I didn't win it right away, because it might have taken away something from the appetite. The fact that I got third, second, first, and kind of got my wins from there, kind of really built a kind of momentum for me. And yeah, I was competing up until 25, which was when I did the Facing Goliath documentary. That show was 2001. And I didn't know that was sort of the end point, but I also felt through the documentary, I was noticing these guys getting so huge and so much bigger than would fit for film or television even, that I thought that's not the direction I want to go. And I kind of hit the national level, and I won my shows, and I felt that I needed to kind of call it a day at that point and kind of redirect my focus.
So that was 15 to 25. So at the same time, though, you're in high school and you're in this small film community thing, right? During that whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Simultaneously. So what was that?
Yeah. Well,
what was that like?
I think the film stuff started when I was around 17, around grade 11. I kind of jumped into a media studies class at school and theater arts programs. And then at the same time, I also heard the nearby city of Fredericton had the film cooperative. So I was doing my training at lunch at school, and I'd walk around with like a couple sandwich bags and a big bucket of water with me just to kind of keep hydrated and eating all the time. But then after school, I'd head back into the city maybe do more workouts, but I also on the weekends would connect with the film cooperative, and my classes and studies started kind of focusing more on, you know, experimental film projects, things like that, and doing some stuff on stage, playwriting and things like that. So that was sort of my in-class stuff started revolving around that, and my break times were still involving the workouts. And so in high school, it was kind of a novel thing because I think probably one of the few guys competing in bodybuilding competitions. So I was able to bring some of my friends in on that toward my last year or two of high school, and then when high school was finishing up, that's when some larger films were starting to come into the city. They usually not like in Toronto, but there'd be maybe one or two like Harlequin Harlequin novel kind of stories, or you know, movies of the week, things like that, stuff that CBC or CTV was doing, the major networks in Canada here.
Sure.
And so yeah, it gave me a kind of bridge into it while I was competing through those years.